every day. So we'll go ahead and start the meeting off with a pledge of allegiance. So if you would join me by standing. Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. All right, looks like we have quite a few things on the agenda, so we'll move swiftly to get us out of here by 4 o'clock. You want to close to that? Okay, all right. Go ahead and turn it over to our town manager, Randy Bossberg.
All right, I'll talk quick.
All right.
So thank you, Mayor and council members. Thank you for being here for the work session. First item that we have is our special events process review. So you have 2 documents in front of you. One is the slideshow, the other is the policy. It's in draft form. And I want to emphasize that in the draft, your meeting as late as yesterday. There were some changes this morning. So I don't want you to be too tied to the exact language that's here. This is for discussion. While we're having a work session, we've got some input that we need from you, some conversations to have. So I do want to thank the town staff that have been working on this particular item. I'll mention Lisa and Craig. There are many others that have been a part of it as well. I will turn it over to Lisa.
Okay, special events we're talking about today. So the town of Apex is growing. We hear that all the time, but that's still true. And that's especially true for special events. We had a lot of new things that came up last year. So we created this town special event policy as a conversation. So it's a conversation with staff, a conversation with administration, and ultimately with council, with you guys, so we've come to some impasses, some crossroads, where we're to go forward. So I pulled out some sections of note. And I know you guys are gonna ask me a lot of questions, but I'm also gonna ask you some questions today to see where we're gonna move forward. A couple of things that I want to pull out in the beginning. Number one, sustainability. With our strategic plan, one of our big goals is environmental leadership. We did win an EPA grant to track recycling at events. Right now, we're not doing that at all. So we have an educational campaign. We have a bunch of these new cans. They're going to have an educational campaign on them, some stickers. We cut holes in them, so hopefully people will only put bottles in cans and not open them up and put styrofoam in them. We marked them at the 1/4, 1/2, and 3/4 way. We are using volunteer staff to go around with Parks Ops and Public Works. So we'll be documenting tonnage of recycling at events. We did add in the policy that we would like to also have a recycling dumpster every time we have a trash dumpster, because oftentimes it's really hard for staff when they have a trash dumpster and they have to haul the recycling off. So that's one thing that we did add to the policy that I would like to make note of. The second thing is inclusion in our non-discrimination policy. One big push this year we had was to be more inclusive at our events. I did have legal review all of this, and our non-discrimination policy is very strong and we're super proud of it. So that's one thing I did want to make note of. The other thing I want to talk about is political parties. Now it's a good time because it's the election season. Right now with community events, it's at the purview of the community organizer where they do or do not want to have political parties. At this time, the only person that's taking advantage of that is Peak Fest, and they do have both the Republican and the Democrats there. But for town events, something in the policy that staff feels that we might not want to have political parties at events at all. So no campaigning, no fundraising. So those are some things that we want to have some questions to talk about.
You talk about that now, or do you want to?
Well, I can keep going. Yeah, let's talk about now because I'm gonna.
I just some clarity. When you mean prohibited, you mean they can't table or
right?
Can
so like
if they show up and just walk around?
No, they can. So that's what the event is inclusive. So everybody can come to the event. If you want to walk in and hand out flyers and things like that, you can't sit down at a table. You can't have a stake in the ground. But if you want to walk and talk, you can definitely do that. But as far as being a vendor, as applying to be a vendor and have political parties at events. One thing that we were thinking was that it would be a good idea to have no political parties at events and that we want to deal with who comes and who doesn't and saying yes and saying no. We don't have any verbiage right now that talks about whether we would or would not. We have a few things in our ordinance. We kind of wanted to kind of clarify some things in this policy. Would we or would we not have political parties?
I think that makes sense, and I'm not pushing back at all. I'm just curious about, it seems like a slippery slope where you might have some organizations which are viewed as kind of partisan, and then they want a table, and then some people might say, well, say no political parties, and you have this,
So for example, with our Latina Arts Festival, we had some groups that wanted to do some voter registration. And
Right.
so I did
Yes.
check with legal. And so every time I get something like that, if we had something like this, I would check with legal and they would determine whether or not they felt that was safe to move forward. And we did feel that was safe to move forward with voting rights, voter registration at the Latino Arts Festival event. So I would do individual check-ins with things like that. So it could be customized for the event because sometimes people have, like with Earth Fest, there's a lot of people want to come out and table for certain events. But they also want to table on behalf of one party. So those things would be checked in with legal, but we wouldn't have outright political parties be able to register, like the Green Party or the Republican Party or the Democratic Party come out and table at an event, is what we were saying.
I guess the question, in spirit, I like the idea. I guess what I really have a question about is, what's our concern? I mean, do we have parties shooting at each other at events? Or
I think our concern is that trying to stay as nonpartisan as possible, and that once we say yes to one, we say yes to all. And my concern is that also becomes a slippery slope. But I think it'd be nice to have some verbiage that was approved by you guys that said no political parties. And that way I don't have to have questions. That obviously there will be, exceptions and things that we were just talking about that I could talk to legal about and say, what do you think? What do you think? But as of right now, we have nothing that says that if a certain political party wanted to be at an event, there's nothing that really prohibits them from being there, based on what we have now. So I just wanted to have some verbiage in place that would give us, some parameters and saying, it's up to you.
I feel like it also goes beyond, political parties. It sounds a little less challenging, but when you get into individual campaigns, I think that's more where we could have issues. So I think our approach was just to stay away from all of it because that's not the field that we participating as staff for a town event. But certainly if we did open it up, because I think there is a slippery slope, not to speak for legal, but it puts legal kind of in crosshairs of having to decide what is this organization affiliated with, and I don't want to speak to what research they're going to have to go through that. So I think there is an element of it could be problematic, but as far as from a staff perspective, we weren't thinking that was the feel for town event.
It's a little bit, there's tension between inclusion and what we're talking about right now, right? On the one hand side, we say we want to be inclusive, but, we're not going to allow certain groups to participate. I understand what you're saying, but then how is some group that is highly partisan, going to get vetted against this language, right? Because that's where we're going to get into trouble. We may say, okay, the Dems or the Republicans cannot show up, but some group closely associated to either one can.
Like what? What are you thinking?
Was it Mothers for Liberty or something like that? Or,
Okay, one of those type.
So
voter registration groups are affiliated with one side.
Yeah, but okay.
Can we hear from legal real quick? So they should-
Well, I was also just going to point out that it's similar to our rules about signage on town property, so that we don't create an appearance that we are supporting one group or another, or one candidate or another.
And we're speaking about town events, how many town events do we currently have in this?
There's a chart.
But also the idea that we are inclusive, the event itself is inclusive. Anybody is welcome to be there, but who we choose to table is something different. That is, I'm saying, maybe in our purview. So
it just feels like we're pushing the tea around the plate a little bit, right? By saying, okay, you cannot, but then somebody, that associates with you can, right? And so I don't know, I'm just wondering if we create more problems by doing this than what we're helping ourselves from prevent. Because now we are in an arbitration type scenario, where do we, the voter registration, right? Now we got to go ask for legal opinion, is this allowable, yes or no, right? Whereas, okay, if it's open for everybody, then there's no question.
I think it puts the way I see it, and I agree with everything so far, but I'm looking at it puts the town staff in a position that I don't really like, that they have to make decisions in the operations and like that these others.
You're saying doing this helps with that.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
and I would offer, you get requests from individual candidate per se, and you're restricted on bidders at your event too. You have specific
candidates there and then you don't have space for other candidates. And also opens up for example, that side of that too, like Alice said, he's able to be here, or she's able to be here, we're not able to be here. And I think for us, it creates a position.
And again, we're not telling them they cannot come and hand out flyers, shake hands, talk about it. It's just not having the exact vendor space for them.
What about, a currently elected official who wants to meet with their constituents? But they be allowed to do that in the portion of their term when they're not on the ballot, and then 6 months when there's an election, they fall into this rule, or just you can't come at all if you're a congressman who wants to come to Federal Festival instead of cable.
I mean, I would argue that's still, a partisan political activity. Not shake hands.
And they're running all the time, right? If they're in Congress, like the example, they're never not running.
I mean, I'm okay with it. Like, I have some concerns that this might not work out as well as you planned. I hope that we have to start making judgment calls about whether ABC voter registration group is a part of the group or not. They think that could be creating the problem we're trying to avoid. I'm a little worried. That being said, like you mentioned, the only place where this happens is Peak Fest, which is a community festival. So it's not actually happening today. So I think if we were eliminating something that was already happening, like back to this, like this is the status quo, we'll draw a line, see how it goes.
Yeah, I share the concern. I'm willing to go with staff recommendation, right? If there's a problem that I think we're solving here, then I'm all for it. But I do have that concern that, you can have proxies that now we need to vet instead of the party or the candidate itself.
And not to complicate it, but this will come up a little bit later on in our discussion when we get into sponsorships too, because there is something I want to talk about related to that. So, and to the point, because this is something new that we're trying, I would also ask a little bit of grace from council that we're going to navigate this the best way we can, but there might be some things that we didn't know that organization was affiliated, whatever. So we're going to do our best to kind of go through that and we may make a mistake.
I mean, I like where the staff's recommendation is going. I know when I saw the slide, started reviewing them, Sunday night, this was one of the ones that kind of, that bullet gave me a little bit of, I want to think about it. I feel like I like where we're going, but I do think it's important that we think about what are the unintended consequences. So I like where we're headed. I don't think that should stop us from making that as an option, but I do think we need to kind of also keep thinking about, okay, what are the unintended benefits? What are the unintended consequences? And how this is ultimately going to create some interesting issues, because, as a lawyer, I don't want to put more work on the lawyers.
Can I ask a question about the inclusion? Like, what's language did we add and what problem did that solve?
I just want to draw your attention to it. So there's a non-discrimination clause, and I just want to draw your attention that it is really robust. I'm on a special event committee for different special event regional people throughout the Southeast, and we talk about inclusion and making sure that IMCs are open and all, that our festivals are open and all, and ours was highly lauded, and I had legal look over it. I just want to draw your attention. That's what we do have in ours, because we are really proud of that piece. So
Okay.
I just want to draw your attention to that piece.
That's not it was just like kind of.
Yeah,
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Section of note to, as part of our inclusion for events, it's a big focus for us this year.
So
So it's on
everybody,
page 11.
is everyone good with that?
Okay, so here's the time I get to ask you guys some questions. So we had alcohol at a town event this past June for Juneteenth, and I have 4 questions, but I'm going to start with the first one. Do you guys want to allow alcohol at town events? Yes.
Oh, hold on. Councilman Smith?
So this discussion
I'm a no, actually, on that.
is all about town events.
Yeah, I'm kind of a no on the count.
I'm a no,
Wow.
as town sponsor.
Town sponsor, no.
Liability.
Never had. Don't do it.
Because I just think the town sponsored events are more of a, supposed to be usually a more family friendly type of event for everybody, not just adults, not focused on adults. Unlike Pig Fest, which is a lot more adult focused, but it's a community event.
Discuss that piece more, because I have for you a table and it kind of talks about other municipalities, what Garner's doing, what Cary does, what Raleigh does. It's in reference to everything with alcohol, so I kind of gives you an idea of what our neighbors are doing. I know there's some staff feelings, there's some community organizing feelings, and I kind of just want to know what you guys think. Like, what direction do we go in? Because I won't go with the other three questions if you're like, no. But if you guys say yes, then I have three follow-up questions for you.
What did Cary do?
So Cary right now does have a social district, and their social district is their downtown piece. And so they contract with a third party, and so everything goes to them. They don't try to make any money off of their vendors because they already have it. Their third party vendor, they take a percentage of that handles most of their events. So like the Minnow Cheese Festival and things like that. But they already have it with their downtown piece. So
Yeah, so, but that's different, right? So we're talking about setting up alcohol vending for the
yeah, and
event
if you-
specifically, which we're talking about.
we skip ahead to these. The first piece is alcohol at town events. We haven't done it before. We did do it. And do we want to continue doing it or no? That's the first question for you guys. Would you like to continue having alcohol at town events?
The one that you did, was there any issues?
Did not have any issues with the alcohol at the town event. I mean, in reference to like the work people and stuff.
I got a question with the community event. If they do it on town property, they can have it, right? So what's the difference if it's on town property for a town event versus a community event?
So we can't hold an ABC permit, so when they do it, they assume the liability. For us, what we're trying to put forward, if we do have on town, the liability would lie with the vendor and not with the town. So that would be the part of the next question.
Yeah.
But so right now, there is a lot of liability, but right now with community events, we push that all onto them. We do give them permission, and Randy signs a piece of paper with that, but they go through the ABC and they hold the liability for it. And so if we did have it at town events, our goal would be to throw that liability out to the vendors themselves.
So that means that every individual vendor, we now need to go check their ABC. permit.
Yeah, but most of them, so like if you're a brewery, you already have an offsite permit. So you already have the ABC permit to go offsite.
I thought that's why we had police officers. Oh. The operation of the alcohol. And-
So that's number three. So we do have security. Apex goes a step above and beyond. So we have security at the event, but right now, if we do have an ABC boundary, we do have extra police that's determined by the Apex Police Department. And they determine the number of police that we have, and they secure that no alcohol leaves those boundaries. That's a step that we have. That's someone's question too that I'm going to ask you about later.
Which is my point, like whether the town sponsor events versus community events, you still have police officers there to control the alcohol concerns. So what's the difference? I mean, if it gets past a police officer, doesn't the town actually still have liability because we have provided police officers there?
Well, my larger concern is not really the, I mean, certainly gonna be the last person to stand up here and say, I'm my kid's drinking. That would be purely hypocritical. But my real concern is not necessarily in terms of the alcohol or the safety or the kind of the family issues associated. It's more, being associated with an event that has a community event that has to go through all the ABC permitting and all of that stuff. Is that something that we're willing to kind of take on? Because that's not a, not an easy task. And I know that we would be pushing this off to vendors. Essentially, do we have a sense as to whether or not the vendors are?
It depends on the vendor. So if it's a brewery, they usually almost always have offsite permits. If not, if it's like a food truck, there was a change in Wake County. If it's a nonprofit food truck, they have more hurdles to climb. There's been a couple of changes over the summer about that. If there's somebody who wants to come out, generally speaking, you can't get a permit if you don't make it yourself. So a distributor can't come out. So we couldn't have distributors. So you need to be able to make the product. So wine is a real complicated one because there's not a lot of people making wine. I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I just have experience with doing that.
Yeah.
It kind of varies by the vendor that will be chosen.
Yeah, I mean, that to me seems to be where the real, I guess, the limiting factor is gonna be in the extension of that ABC permitting. I mean, it'd be a lot easier if North Carolina wasn't so complicated about the ABC permitting. You know, but it's-
So I'll give you some municipalities, they just use local people or Carrie goes to this third party vendor a lot. So it kind of varies on how they do it. And that's kind of some of the parameters we're hoping to get answered from you guys. You know, if we do alcohol, do we do this? Do we do that? Do we not? But I didn't want to bog you down with the other 3 questions. If the answer was no, we don't do alcohol, but if it is, got some problems.
So what's the impact on the town, right? So what do we assume in terms of liability if we don't hold the ABC permits? What do we assume in terms of security expense or, fencing up an area or, so Parks and Rec staff who set that up. So what's kind of the implication of doing it versus not doing it?
So that's kind of a complicated question because right now, the APD does have the security piece. We do add that extra level. There has been some talk about not having that. That was one of the suggestions from one of the community organizers, not having that. So that's a question that I'm going to be putting to you guys about security. If we do have it, you don't have to have the extra security. Apex likes to have it. And if we do have it, who's going to pay for it? We put that on the vendors. Would the town themselves pay for that? Those are some questions that I have for you guys later on. As far as putting up the alcohol fencing for town events, that will be our responsibility. The last thing, I got someone from PD in the back.
As a quarterly, it's not required to have any extra police presence at any kind of event like that. That was something that former Chief Letney, like any police officers, there's going to be alcohol service. So we don't have to have it there, but could save the town money. I talked to the chief and he doesn't really doesn't care if we have it there or not. He doesn't really have a strong feeling either way. We're kind of doing it because that's what it's in place for that. So that's something you could think about if you like the idea of having house where alcohol is going to be served, other than the perimeter security that we already provide, like locking streets on stuff like that. So that's something to think about.
I'll add from my experience, it's commonly done. If you are going to have alcohol, then you do have an increased police presence. So I understand the chief is either way, but I don't necessarily, I think it's a good thing if we're going to have that increased presence, and then we can debate who pays for it. But I think it's a good balance, and I've seen that in other jurisdictions.
Yeah, I believe it's a good investment. Officers do understand. That's what I'm making a decision.
I do agree to that to an extent, I guess, for consistency by the size of events, how do you determine how many police officers you have, and who holds that cost?
So the additional said, so like there's something of the discussed how there was going to be 4 entrances to the festival. So each supervisor to control that area, and then we have the officers who block off the routes. So like something on a town campus, maybe Oktoberfest, where it's going to be in this one little area with less cops because it's a smaller footprint. Which is talking about like 5,000, 10,000 people coming, I would say maybe more cops, but a couple thousand people is a good number.
Thanks.
And I guess, and I'll refer to you and you for this question, which is, I mean, we've had a couple of community events that all serve alcohol. Do we have any tangible increase in kind of like fights or public urination or other unlawfulness that we've had to contend with?
Not that I've seen, not with Oktoberfest or with Big Fest. I'll let Conley speak to it historically.
And I asked that just so that I've got a kind of I know that it's easy to kind of say, it's easy to say, hey, we have those issues. We don't have those issues because we have a large police presence, but it's also, I don't know if that's a correlation or causation effect. I think that's just an interesting data point.
So the larger question is, and I'll just skip right ahead to here, social districts. And I know this is something that we have talked about, and I do have a list of who does have a district, who does not have a district. We were talking about vendors themselves. They are shying away from ABC permitted areas because they are not inclusive with the festival. Because you're off the corner drinking like you're kind of weird, so we are actually doing a little bit different for Festa Italiana. So all of Hunter Street is going to be the ABC permitted area. It will all be fenced off, by them. So that will be, people can walk up and down, So a lot of places like Holly Springs and Morrisville kind of flirt with the idea of having quote unquote social districts just for events. So that's something else I was going to put out, because Raleigh, Cary, and Fuquay do have social districts. Fuquay doesn't really use them for their town events or for their events in general. And then Wake Forest does not have a social district, but they are thinking about having it again. So the social districts kind of play into different ways about where you have them, how you use them. Are they temporary? Do you want them at events? Is that something to be considered? That's something that came up. A lot of vendors don't like the idea of having to stay in a small area because they feel like they don't get as many sales that people are brought away from the event itself. They're not able to flow with the festival.
So what's the recommendation of staff? Great or no?
I think from our standpoint, I've identified there are two issues. There's liability, and whether it's $1 more in liability, I think we would all say that it leads to potentially more liability. It may not be $1,000, it may be $1 million, but I think having it has an increased liability. The other piece is, I heard talking about family appeal to the event. I mean, that's a policy decision from our perspective. So if you're okay with that, and that's not an issue, and it's just liability, but if that's a problem, you're going to need help.
I'm kind of in the, let's keep the family friendliness camp. So people walking around with their beers, kind of go counter to that. And, I've heard of different scenarios, different events where people don't want to show up because, we're meeting at the brewery or something like that, right? And they like, I can bring my kid into a beer hall, right? And so since these events are catered to be culturally inclusive, right? We want to promote that's, the family friendliness across cultural boundaries and all that. Like, I think that really needs to be the overarching objective here. So my preference would to exclude alcohol from town events. I'm still finding it with community events, they have more of their own, own setup and their own themes. So to speak, and just being a prime example with beer garden and all that. It's a big part of what Big Fest is, right? It makes total sense there, but for these cultural events, I don't think that.
I'm still a no. Also,
Most of them still on town property, right?
Yeah, we can't really do it. We did do downtown and we did rope off the deep area. Like I said, we're exploring Hunter Street. We have the town courtyard before.
So the liability piece, and it's whatever. But I guess my thing is for the vendor of the alcohol, is that the hang up? Like, who has a liability there? Or some pay for
No,
it?
they don't really, from my experience, and this is limited because we've only done it once. I've talked to a bunch of vendors, so note that it's just from this one event. They don't really have a problem with that. They sort of have a problem with committing funds ahead of time without knowing what they're gonna, because we're rain or shine, period. I think that's pretty standard. But also, they feel as though they don't make as much money when it's roped off in an ABC area. That's the pervasive, thought with them. So some of them will come out. They're not concerned about, well, they already have the ABC. Most of them, for the ones that I've talked to, the nonprofit I had to work with, she jumped through hoops, but she eventually got it. So that wasn't really the hang up for them. It was more the cost. Are they gonna make money? Because oftentimes at events, they have to get there early to set up. So there's a lot of staff time. They're just sitting there before they sell alcohol as well.
You know, what, I'm totally not sensitive to any of that, but that is a function of the business model that a vendor has chosen, right? That is a risk that they have chosen to accept as part of having a truck that sells beer or whatnot. So it is not up to the town or the town's responsibility to make sure that the vendors are profitable at one of our events, right? That is their business model, that's their concern. So none of that carries any weight for me.
Are there 3 no's? I heard a no from you.
Still,
Okay, we have 3
I'm still
no's.
thinking.
Let's move on.
So to me, this is about like the overall, I went through this presentation. And the overarching theme that I see is capacity. And you get to it in like 7 or 8 slides, special event world, how the number of festivals that we're putting on is increasing. And our staff can't handle it. There's only so many festivals that we can do. And at a certain point, we have to define for ourselves, what is a town festival? What are we doing? What is a community festival? And the whole point of that distinction is there would be, there would be a certain set of stuff which would be more appropriate for a community festival, a certain set of stuff more appropriate for a town. And we just know what that is. It's a policy decision. But our whole purpose of making that distinction was that there would be a distinction. So to me, it seems, I didn't think too deeply about this, but like, I would imagine alcohol would be in the community center, make it a community event, and you can show what you want.
Because of how much it adds to the effort for town events, you mean? Yeah.
It's the scalability issue for the staff. Another thing that they have to do, and there's 20+ events they gotta put on, is we have to manage this, but it's the overall principle of like, we have to draw a box around what our guys are doing. Plus we want to give Lisa a staff of 50 people, that's all we're doing. There's the box around what is a town event, what do we want to throw on.
Can I offer one thing before we make a decision here? We're gonna talk about Juneteenth, right? And some of the concerns that.
Yeah, so I didn't get a chance to get to that part yet, so, right here, I have all the comments, for Juneteenth, and the reason I see about Juneteenth is that's the only event we've had alcohol. So what I have is I have staff comments, and I have the community organizer comments, and what I'm looking for now is, where do you guys wanna go? What do you wanna do? So, I put it to you.
So just to ask, let's kind of go through the commentary and then make a decision. Sure. Based on the completer picture.
Okay, so I'll just kind of run through this. Some of the things that were pulled out, right now we have a vendor fee. Our vendor fee is $300. We came to that because right now between all the different municipalities, and you'll see a chart there, they range from $0 to $500. So we kind of went mid-range. This is the first time we did it. We didn't know, we thought let's start in the middle. So we are charging $300. We do charge all vendors to come who are not nonprofit. So we do think having some charge is important because it kind of gives buy-in to the event, especially with alcohol. Where we land with this fee is sort of up to you guys as well. Like I said, Wake Forest is all the way at 500, carries at 0. They don't want to make big money. So it kind of depends on if we want to have a vendor fee or not for alcohol, if we choose to have it. And we can talk about this, or I can keep going through and going all of them. We can talk about all of it, or it's up to you. Should I keep going, or you want to talk about that part?
Yes.
Keep going. Okay, the next thing is that security, which we've already kind of talked about a little bit. As commonly referred to, not everybody has to have this, but Apex Police Department does prefer to have extra security when we do have an alcohol barrier, and we want to see if you guys want to continue that. Some feedback that we got from the organizers, they would maybe potentially like, we don't have to do this, that's the thing that Apex does, because it was a cost, and we have to decide, it is a cost that we have to have off-duty officers, and if it's a cost that the town's going to absorb, or if we're going to put it on the vendors, because that was cost prohibitive, some people felt. So the number of vendors could split it, but still they found that to be with the vendor fee cost prohibitive for attending the event. So if we do have the security, like we have been doing with APD, do we want to assume the cost or put the cost on the vendors? The last piece is, of course, the social district. Do we want to have a social district? Do we want to have temporary ones when we have events? I know it's a conversation you guys had before. I don't know where it is now, but just kind of moving forward. A lot of municipalities are having these conversations right now. So where we are with that piece. And then I kind of went through and I broke it down what Wake Forest is doing, Fuquay, Holly Springs. We all kind of have a hodgepodge of what they're doing. The only people that seem to have it figured out are Raleigh and Cary right now. They have social districts. They don't have, like Raleigh doesn't have alcohol at town events unless they have a partner. Diggs Park would go in with somebody, so with Moore Square. Cary, like I said, they mostly go to a third party vendor. Morrisville and Gar doesn't allow alcohol at town events. They go through a downtown association. So they have like this one to control Morrisville, but that's only when they have events. Same thing with Holly Springs. They have 3 events that they work on it with, their international festivals and their cultural arts center, which already has an ABC permit, so they're fine there. They do have Holly Fest, and then they have Spring Fest or Spring Fling. They partner with Team Field, the baseball teams. That's how they kind of get around that one. So Fuquay does have it, but they only don't do it in their main event space. They only make one exception, and that is for their international festival. Wake Forest does have alcohol at their events. But it's just one town event, and it's this red and white night or beer. Like white and red or something like that. And they have this one area that they do it. They do it on these Friday nights, like Friday night white or something like that. So everybody's kind of doing something different. So sort of understanding what Apex wants to do. So I gave you some parameters and some ideas of what they're doing. And then I have some feedback, and I just put this feedback in here as is. So some things that they heard that the alcohol vendors felt some of our costs were prohibitive. They were concerned about the vendor having to put up a lot of money and goods before they even paid money, and they asked me to look into what other municipalities are doing. So Broogaloo is a private event that's through local Raleigh, and the Federal Cheese Festival we already addressed. I don't know if you want me to just read this to you, or you guys would like to read it. It's in the presentation. I can kind of take them one by one, or we can kind of just start chatting. But basically, they were the vendor fees they had talked about. They were talking about the off-duty officer fees, and that was security, if we have them, and if we do, who does pay for them. That's pretty much their feedback.
A question on the fee. So is it the fees that we're charging for vendors to be there, or is it the AC fees, or what?
It is 2 fees. It is the vendor fee that we charge at $300. And then it would be if we ask them to assume part of the cost of the off-duty officers.
And this is still separate and apart from any ABC licensing.
Yes, yes.
My preference is to charge them the same as food trucks. They're gonna be charging them a fee across the board.
If we're gonna go down that route, they need to pick up the cost of the extra police coverage. Right, so I'm fine with the fee being higher and then picking up the cost of the police presence, right, assuming that it's a wash, right? But if we're going to be charging them less, then it basically puts the cost of security squarely on the town. I don't think that's, if we need to add security, or we want to add security because of alcohol sales, then in my mind, that needs to come from the alcohol vendors, not the town.
Do other municipalities make that distinction between town events and community events that we do?
Yes, yes. So Raleigh doesn't do town events with alcohol unless they go with another partner. Their special events office only handles community third-party events. So it would be like at Diggs Park or Moore Square where they would be doing something like that. Cary basically is very hard to compare ourselves to because they're very different what they're doing. Because they have that social district, because they have that third-party vendor, they don't really charge, and they have it at town events, but it's very weird. They've done some things at late days and spring days, but they don't even try to recoup money there because they were trying to get a percentage of it. That was too hard, so they've just kind of been like, Fuquay only has that one event. Holly Springs has 3. It's sort of like everybody's kind of grandfathered in special events for this. They're not really open to new ones. Like Wake Forest has just that, I think it's white on Friday and white or something like that, where they have like 2 beer and 2 wine, but they're all local. And Holly Springs only uses their local breweries. So everybody's kind of playing a different game. With this, Wake Forest has just started the conversation about having a social district again. Holly Springs is kind of tiptoeing towards that area. They sort of have a temporary one. They sort of have an event. They have an area downtown that somebody owns the building, and in between this wine bar, you open up the patio, and there's some questions there because it's sort of they're cultural arts centers, they can kind of have some things. So they're sort of playing around with it. It looks like everybody's kind of picking and choosing, except for Raleigh and Cary, to be honest. And I think we're sort of in that boat, so you know where we want to be. Yeah, I'm asking you, guys, where would you like to be?
So we did do this for community events with setting up a social district, made it easier for vendors to serve alcohol.
Yes, I can tell you from Big Fest, they would love that.
Is that the sort of, like, it seems like the overhead here is just the work involved in getting the permits and getting set up and the fencing and everything. Is such a social district make that easier? I'm hoping that's the purpose.
I haven't had personal experience, but I would say yes, from what I've heard. They don't have to have fencing
Yeah.
and all of that. The other question is when you do have a social district, it is, you have to work out with if we were to have one downtown, would you want the breweries that be part of that or not part of it? And Raleigh, they give them the choice of opting out or not opting in, you know, they give them that choice. So to kind of understand if they would like to be part of it or not part of it, you know, and that wouldn't be up to the choice of the community organizer unless you'd like it to. So for example, if something like Pit Fest came in, they only wanted to use certain breweries, could they ace out Oakland Springs and say you can't be part? I mean, we'd have to have some strict rules in place and some parameters to say, if we have this, then our downtown business can be part of it if they want to or not, but it would be their choice. That's something else we can put.
And just to be clear, we're talking about the temporary social district right now.
I'm in favor of one permanently, especially after our streetscape thing is finished.
That's
That's the difference.
Yeah. I don't want a temporary one. I think we should do it or not do it. And I lean toward doing it even before the thing's done, but especially after the thing's done. Anyway, that's where I'm at on that one.
Oh, this list of fees, this is just for town events, or this is?
Yeah, just for fun. Like I said, the 300 was just sort of mid-range because we have never done this before. We kind of looked at what everybody else is doing. So certainly that is something that we have feedback on as well.
I think based on the concerns presented by Juneteenth committee, it was for alcohol vendor to come here, pay those fees, and then have to pay also for security. It doesn't benefit them from coming. So how do we adjust it?
Yeah, so for Juneteenth, we did use sponsorship money for the security fees. But that was the question. If events don't have sponsorship money, would the town pay for that? Would we like to continue that? You know, or we'd like to pay for the security if we end up keeping the extra security.
Yeah, I tend to lean on the issue of fees. I tend to lean much closer to Councilmember Wentworth because it seems like if we're charging them more than just with the food truck, it seems as though we would be charging them more because we're using that money probably for security. So they're just going to have to pay for security anyways. Why don't we just drop the price and treat a food truck and a beer truck basically the same?
But so if it was a community event, they can charge whatever they want, nothing at all. Right? Like it was just for a town event.
Just for time as well.
So
We want alcohol at those events.
I don't understand why you just don't make it a community event. Confused.
If the organizer wants to sell alcohol, they can make it a
Hawk up
community event.
It's hawk out there on that street light. Big one. Sorry.
Literally.
Yeah.
I didn't know what you were saying.
Yeah, it's just a,
You're pointing at me like.
no, it's all right. I couldn't help but see that giant bird there.
I'm still in favor of allowing alcohol at town events.
Maybe that community organization don't have the foundation and support, funding, whatever, they need the town support. I don't know. Maybe that's why they want to make it town.
I think I'm still at my position that it's no alcohol at town events. I do agree with Councilmember Happy that if the organizer wants to serve alcohol and that becomes like a primary thing or like a critical thing to their events, they can opt out of town event and make it a community event.
And we didn't work on making a temporary social district to make it easier.
Right. And for community
one.
events, I'm okay with a temporary social district like Big Fest with the condition that we cannot exclude vendors that are in that temporary social district.
Okay, I'm still a no as well.
But community events are still family friendly. Right here.
I mean, I think Peak Fest is more family friendly than Pig Fest is, and part of it is the alcohol, I think.
The whole point of the event is they could have more flexibility to define the family friendliness of their event. It could be an adult oriented barbecue pig beer festival, or it could be a, kids town come jump on something. They have flexibility. Like that's why we have that. That's what I thought was to explicitly allow them to make those decisions if those have the event that they want.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm thinking that I'm leaning towards the distinction between a community and event and a town event, I think is where I'm leaning on this one. So I'm not quite convinced that alcohol for town events is there yet. I mean, the arguments on both sides are very persuasive. And it really, I mean, it's like, what's the difference between something that's on town property and people don't know the difference between this is a town event versus a community?
I think on that one, I think the liability is not a fight or public urination. It's someone over consuming, getting in a car and killing somebody. Let's say that's the liability. So, you hear about this with restaurants where the Chapel Hill place, La Res, they got sued like out the wazoo for over serving. And, it can be on the town property, but it's the Pig Fest people who are kind of responsible for that and the servers there. Whereas the town event, it's like town people, right? So like.
To that point, like if you go through this list of
Third party.
Of the different towns and what they've done, how they've allowed out. They all have this clever way of trying to find a way for a vendor to be responsible. And the way that I thought we created was this community event. That is our way of setting the vendor responsible. We're still going to help. We're still going to advertise. So we have criteria for what a community event is and what a town event is. But that was our way, like all the other ones, of having, another party be the one serving the alcohol. Let's make the concern of liability, like I said, is that we're the ones serving the alcohol. Like that applies a certain level of liability that typically a risk-averse municipality wouldn't want to take. Like get some vendor to do it somehow, you get some, it's a community event, it's not one of our events, we're just hosting, providing space.
Craig is not serving alcohol, right? Just
Well, the scenario I described, it's not Craig serving the alcohol, but the town event is serving alcohol, and who gets sued is probably the person serving the alcohol, like whoever that is, the brewery and the town. They're gonna get locked in because we got the money compared to the vendor. Right? I mean, right? Is that what would happen, do you think? I mean, I would include the town in a lawsuit if I was.
Yeah, I think in either event, we're probably likely to be sued, but with the community events, we have things in place to shift that liability to vendors, to the community organizers.
All right, let's move on.
All right. So did we agree on no alcohol at town
Yeah,
events?
I think we got votes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a vote.
Okay, the next section is sponsorships. So I'm gonna leave the big question, do we want to have sponsorship opportunities at events? And I'm gonna turn it over to Randy.
So similar to the question we brought up. And this could have implications to other parts outside of community, outside of town events. So thinking about that too, we're not trying to kill like the local orthodontist office sponsoring a team or something like that. But I do think that depending on the standard of council, wants to hold staff to on this is my concern. If we allow XYZ Chicken Company to sponsor an event and maybe they have political beliefs that are in conflict with town values and beliefs, does that become an issue? If the position is no, if it's a local business, we're okay if they're sponsoring it, we don't care, we'll take the money for that sponsorship, it's fine. But if we're gonna have standards where we look at our values versus a particular company's values, that's where I think it becomes complicated. So we'd like a little direction on this. There are two paths. There's open it up, you have sponsorships and allow everybody to sponsor, and there's no sponsorship at all. And then there's the gray in between, which is department I'm with.
So what you're looking at right here is the current vetting criteria that we use. Again, we started the sponsorship officially with Juneteenth. We've kind of had hit or miss things, throughout, like Chick-fil-A gives sandwiches at Turkey Trot and things like that. So this is the vetting criteria that we have. And then some of the opportunities and ideas that were brought up. So Juneteenth wanted to reach out to some larger companies, and they have these sort of online forms that you fill out, like sheets and things like that. And some of the concerns that came with that is, number one, when you go to a large company like that, you're in a slush pile. So if you want to go to Sheets, you can just go and meet the Sheets guy who owns an Apex, or like M&S Bank and go and meet the bank manager. But if you did want to, sometimes they have terms and services that you click on before you've even agreed to anything or seen the application. So, the other thing is, like, at the time, for Sheets, they had a big DEI scandal, so how we want to handle that with grant opportunities at larger companies. The approval process, there was a request that we have a uniform incentive package. That may not work for all the cultural advisory groups and all the missions and visions. So I think even events from year to year change, maybe having a uniform package may not work. We were asked an online payment option, and I would say we do have an online payment option. Teammate Pass. And then extra funds. If there were extra funds that were left over that they could move forward, and we did work it out with finance, they could be per event used the following year. So those were some of the things that were talked about. The other things that were talked about is the level of approvals. We have a checks and balances now, sort of saying like, oh, we have a vetting process. Like, I don't pretend to know what banks that we use or things like that. If there's a developer that we have checks and balances for, it kind of goes up the staff, it goes to Craig and then to administration about who approves the sponsor. Like, who are we saying can sponsor an event? And that was something they were kind of asking about as well. This is some of their feedback on that. And that's, I'll just put through it, but that's sort of what I was kind of summarizing before, but this is their actual wording as well. So I guess the first question is, do we want to have sponsorship opportunities at town events? And to define that, it's different than a donation. A donation is something people give us, they want no recognition. And so that's something we're talking about. If you want to give us chicken sandwiches and we have it out there, we'll put you on the shirt, that's one thing, but do you actually want to have sponsorship that goes on our website and people say, oh, I'm sponsored by a Town of Apex, or I'm working on this event. I did talk to a lot of other municipalities, and some of them use these little cards that say they give about sponsors, like that says, I'm sponsoring this event. So not like a town, the town's sponsoring this. There's ways to define it. It's sort of how we want to handle it if we do have sponsorships, but it's up to you. So it's the larger questions, alcohol. Do you want town sponsorship opportunities?
Ask the question first.
Yeah.
What about the turkey run? The turkey run, I believe, is a town event.
It is.
And we allow sponsorship.
So those are more like in-kind donations, and we had a conversation about this. So Chick-fil-A is donating sandwiches. So we don't need.
We actually gave money to the town to be a sponsor of that event.
Okay.
So it's not just a donation and, was undershirt and everything. So
I will say this is my first year doing Turkey Trot, and Craig's.
And that goes back to what Randy was saying. So there are areas where we do have sponsorship opportunities. And it could reach further than special events when we talk about sponsorship. So with the verbiage that we have and vetting that we go through, that's the concern Randy has mentioned about how that works. But we do have sponsorship opportunities for our teams too, youth teams. So this could affect several different areas. And that's so I didn't turkey drive.
it was a couple of years ago.
But yeah, so there are other sponsorship opportunities like that in the department. And I don't know that anybody else in other departments has sponsorship opportunities. So for me, it could have ranging effects. So just keep that in mind.
Is there a demand for sponsorships at our events and like you mentioned the youth team? I think there's actually demand, but I think local businesses want a sponsorship. the way to get involved in the community. It's almost like
If it is local businesses that do sponsorships, something he mentioned too, like the local dentistry, like Fingers Dentistry has done it quite a bit. Jersey Mike's, sponsor, all these different areas have sponsors.
Yes.
I'm just really concerned. I mean, my only real concern is again, the administrative overhead of us, where we accept sponsorships for a random town event, any town event that we have, all of them. Is it worth it? And we're in a position where, you know, again, I'm seeing the workload on our staff growing. The amount of work we're putting into each of these events getting larger and larger. And that's what I'm asking. Is it worth it to accept these sponsorships? But I am also, you know, I hear the point about, well, the community wants to be involved. They want to get an opportunity to be involved on the local, which is around. I don't want to deny them that. Just, and I don't want to make more work for people. You definitely don't want to stop people being able to sponsor sports, but it seems like what we do. Always got, you know, kids like it. You feel like a professional, you know, I guess race car driver or whatever.
Right. So is there a way for us to separate the two, right? So is town events intricately linked to sports team sponsorships, right?
Well, let me just ask, like, in my last point, am I making an assumption there that there is overhead here, but would you say that this is?
There is, but I also would say, that in the case, comment on this, but on Juneteenth, like the committee worked to get those sponsorships. It wasn't, Lisa wasn't going out soliciting, but I'm aware of, to get town
No,
sponsorships.
no, they work to get those. I do the back end stuff. So then I would take the inquiry and I would pass it up, and then we would process the money.
So it's the vetting thing, it's the endorsement by the town piece that maybe is some concern.
Right.
That bothers me the most.
It does, if you say anyone can do it, then
Either turn the faucet on or turn the faucet off, or don't hold us accountable if something slips through that it's some company that we don't know what they are affiliated with. It's hard for us to filter people in or out. I think it's dangerous for us to filter people in or out. So we either, I could allow sponsorships and we just know there could be some case with that, or we disallow it because of.
I guess for me, it's just, what is the expectation of the person that is handing money over, say, I want to sponsor it? Or are they expecting to have their name blasted, whatever? Because another example I want to bring up, PD, Chris McCall, people donate money all the time to that. Okay, we don't know that money yet. Identify where the money's coming from, but we do accept it for time. So what's the difference?
And to that point, I think it's back to what Lisa said about donations versus sponsorship. And I'll defer to the council on this, but for us, the way we've tried to define sponsorship is it's this or that. So you're giving us this, we're putting you on the back of the t-shirt, we're putting you on town signs that promote the event, versus the donations, here's $50, go buy a toy for a kid, whatever it is. Sure. And there's nothing that's coming back to them. They may be anonymous. That's how we distinguish it.
I guess the question I was asking is, what are other municipalities doing with regard to sponsoring these sorts of things? I guess, aside from youth sports, athletic, stuff like that.
I mean, I don't have it like all written out. I did the alcohol. It's kind of a hodgepodge. And so when I was reaching out to do the sponsorship, I talked to Carrie a lot because they sort of have this fully vetted process. And I also went through NC State. So I looked at the municipality and I looked at the state level and I kind of pared down from there. I really only investigated Carrie. And so I can't really speak to anybody else. But Carrie did mention for certain things, what they try to do is separate if they do it. And so they have a whole system. So their special event person just works on lazy days and spring days. And then they have other people who kind of farm out to other things. So they have a real focus on certain things, but they're like, lazy days, you can tell is humongous. And they get lots of money because they have art projects. And so it's kind of a different thing for us. So, but they try to differentiate it. They don't like to have it on the website and different places like that. So they have a little square they give them, they can give out. But the other thing is, you can't really say once you've said yes to a sponsor, what they're going to put their logo on or what they're going to say, how they're going to handle their social media as well. So they try to give them some information to kind of say, hey, do it this way, but they can't control what happens. I really couldn't speak to the municipalities.
What about youth in other areas? My kids participate in Holly Springs. They definitely, Saks has had a monopoly on the uniforms in Holly Springs. I mean, I don't know what they gave something, it's tax fees running around Holly Springs everywhere, so. I mean, I do know that other towns, do that, but they also got kids got a free meal. What other tax insurance, but.
Yeah, again, like, I kind of get it in the sports scene, right? It's like, it's a little bit more of a natural fit than town events, right? And I agree, again, it's very, because now we gotta go do all the artwork and, you know, printing the signs and like, you know, the banners that have all these logos on them and stuff like that. And so it feels like we're just inviting more work for ourselves by accepting sponsorships. But I am really sensitive to the sports, like, I don't want to say no here and then, you know, cut out, you know, the local dentist from, you know, supporting his soccer team, right? It's like that doesn't feel right either.
We had talked about a couple of budgets ago. Lori, the capacity as you brought up, having you guys identify a third party to help out with special events.
So, yeah, I have Conley here to talk about that from the police perspective. As far as from trash, from Public Works and Parks Ops, they are against it because they feel like if they talk to Heather Cashwell, who used to be an employee who did a lot at NC State, she said all the companies, they just leave trash behind. They feel like it's not going to be to the standards of Apex. So they don't feel comfortable giving that to the third party. And I will let Conley speak to third party police.
Well, he had a couple of perspectives on that. He didn't really necessarily opposed to, I mean, or as our security was not jumping all in, we're security. We without making a couple of bricks, a smaller company. But he was theory more. Of course, we give our people opportunity like a deadline, but they've been so come, hey, got this event come sign about this.
And we're going to talk about this later. I mean, we do have the volunteer coordinator position, which has been difficult. It's just there's certain things that they just can't help do. So that has been very helpful. So thank you.
Do you have the amount of time that you would spend on that? If you did.
We track the hours monthly, the number of volunteer hours. I don't have it in front of me. We have a bunch of dashboard that she enters the hours in, hours for events that they are at. And now with this new trash piece, we're going to be having more often, more frequently, so we can collect the trash out of track.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. So I was meaning for managing the sponsorships. What is the estimated time you would spend administrating?
Oh, the estimated time administratively. So this grant piece is very, very time consuming because you have to research it and then try to figure out if there's a terms and services, and then ask people if it's terms and services. So that one, I would say if somebody did want to, instead of just going to M&F Bank, I would go to a branch manager and I would talk to a branch manager. That's what I would suggest with that one. As far as the approval process, that's just, you know, they submit a sponsorship like agreement and inquiry, that goes to Craig and I submit it as it is, and then it goes to administration and then it comes back down, and then I let them know if it's a yes or a no, and then we have to collect the money. The collecting the money is the harder part because I don't have the initial conversations. I didn't have the initial conversations, so sometimes it was kind of trying to go through a couple of different people to get the money because they didn't really know who I was, you know, so they're trying to go through this person, and kind of collect the money. And the only problem with that is we really wanted to have the money in hand before we spent it. So I think with that process, if we were to go that route, I would recommend that we stick to a strict deadline so that all the monies, we account for the fact that our people late getting in and some people are late getting them, so that we have the money in hand to spend while the event is still relevant. That makes sense.
Right. How much time?
I would tell you the movement up and down the actual application, it's a pretty quick turn with that. I do believe the opportunities that she has done that definitely take more time. I couldn't put a rank on it. But I would tell you the up and down, didn't take a ton of time. I mean, it's another process during the day, right? So if I'm out one day and then wait a couple of days for the work to get approved and then it goes to Demetria typically is who I send it to. So it could take a couple of days, but I mean, you're talking about 5 to 10 minutes for your application. And then you got to do your research on the company. Okay, nothing's popped up. I mean, how like 10 minutes to review the application, send it up, feature, review it, send it down. And I think at times, it did stall because obviously we have days too. And you have 2 to 3 days before things will sign off. From a time perspective, I could put a time frame.
For me on this one, it's not necessarily the time. I know not diminishing the time that Lisa spent or staff spent on that. To me, it's the level of accountability the council's gonna have with us on sponsorship. If it's, hey, we're fine with what happens and what sponsors come in, then I'm not as concerned. If a couple of these statements, and not on this slide, but the one before, were concerning to me as our criteria, ridicules, exploits, or delete these persons on the race stuff, that's a pretty broad statement. I don't know what companies do or don't do associated with that. So if you guys are just okay with us setting that, and then I don't think it's as big of a concern. So
Good with it. 100%.
You're just looking for direction at this point. Because I feel like there's some pieces that we could chew up an entire evening. But just talking about some of the questions and pieces that are on here. So I like the idea of exploring sponsorship. You know, I think that's something that we could take a look at. I know that you guys are going to come together with some finer details to kind of get us in. Because I do think we need to still make the distinction between sponsorship versus donation versus what we're doing for youth sports versus, I mean, you know, and I love to get a little bit more clarity. And I know in terms of getting a legal check on the idea of how we're saying, yes, you can do this, but you can't, because I do think it bleeds into the political side a little bit, you know. We have we have a party that says, we're a sponsor, we want to have our logo on this, or, you know.
Maybe you should add no, like we did earlier, right?
Right, so, yeah, so that's, you know, that's sort of, I think that's the finer details that we're starting to kind of get into, and I think that, you know, broad spot, okay, fine, people want to help participate, I think that's good. But as we start to figure out the basic details of like, all right, what level of participation and then who we're willing to align ourselves with, I think that's where the finer details are. Okay, we've got more work to do on that component. So
I'm good with it too. I mean, and to me, really the tipping point here is I do think there's certain events that it's like traditional, that community members, that businesses, that individuals are able to participate in. And I would hate to say, we can't do that. If you're saying there's no time issue, that's for mine.
I'm not saying no time issue, but that's a less of a concern.
Less of a concern, sure. Sorry, I know there's, so, you know, you're talking me into it. I'll say, you know, I trust your judgment, I trust Lizzie's judgment. What sponsor I good, and I think this policy would refer to, and if we miss something, let's take on that, right? The issue statement saying you are aware of this, whatever you're talking about that.
Well, I'm a no because of the endorsement part, not so much the time. I care about the time, but just not just like political, but like, you know, I don't like the idea of endorsing one local business over another for our town events. It just doesn't feel right to me. If that's kind of what it is. I mean, you know, I can imagine the person just being so mad, like, oh, well, it looks like the town only cares about fresh when another ice cream shop down the road is not getting this, and I just don't like that. So, that's where I'm at on that one. That bold endorsement thing. That's my problem.
I'm okay with this. You know, we're already doing this to some degree, right? I don't think we've had any issues with the policy. As long as we continue to do the vetting and you know, use our definitions. You know, I think it's an opportunity to improve our events with some additional funding. Give some of our local businesses some exposure within town through local, very targeted local events. So I think this could be a good thing.
Yes, to sponsorships, then are you good with the checks and balances process we have in place?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds like some refinement, and we'll maybe mirror it to the vendor eligibility at town events, which talked about the political side. of it.
I don't like the idea of, chatting about it. I think that's a recipe for trouble. I think do more.
Okay, and then cultural advisory groups. So MLK, Juneteenth, Indigenous Peoples Day, Latino Arts Festival, and Holy. I'm super lucky. I get to work with some people who kind of make sure that I'm hitting the mark on the events. But these groups right now, although they're great and amazing, are very closed. And there's been some talk about other community members getting involved. And with our advisory groups, we do open up to larger community. So there was some question as to, we're gonna maybe try to have at least 3 and no more than 6 community members. They serve 3-year terms, no term limits. It would be like the advisory committee, but we would open it up to the larger community. There was some question about if that would be something you guys would like or not like, or keep it the way they are, or have a chance for other people to join.
Okay, what's the current status of these?
So right now, like for example, Latino Arts Festival, we work with Fiesta Cristiana exclusively, Holy, we work with Home Sub exclusively. There's People's Day, it's Triangle Native American Society, Juneteenth is the Juneteenth Committee, MLK is Payon in a group. And so those groups sort of kind of came with the event. And so they've always been part of it, but the idea is, should we open it up for the larger community to be part of, to add to these communities so that they have a chance to be part of the process of playing. It came up. So Holy there, and I remember having any comments, there were several groups that wanted to have Holy. And so we had Humsa, there's a Nepalese group that wanted to come in. And the idea is, should we open it up so that Nepalese group had a space on this Holy committee so they could be part of the planning process? Because Humsa is, doing this part of it, should the Nepalese group have a chance, and vice versa with MLK or Juneteenth. The Arts Festival, for example, a pastor with Apex Baptist just reached out to me, and he's the Spanish pastor, and he wants to know, could he get more involved? And right now we work with Fiesta. Would it be appropriate for us to have them all work together? How do we see these committees moving forward? I guess this is the question I'm posing to you.
So my preference for each of these groups is that we have the majority of the people, whether it's 3 or 6 or however many community members we're talking about here, that are have a vested interest in these things. So the majority, so if we have 3, 2, be having a vested interest in it, and someone else in the community wants to be involved, fine as that third person, but having a majority, making sure that they're, part of the community or.
Yeah, the idea is to keep everyone who's been working on it, but if somebody else wanted to come in, would that be something that would be?
So this is more of an enforcement function. So, hey, we want you to work with that organization for the next Holy event, because we don't, so like, I'm not sure what we're trying to achieve other than like making people work together, right? It's like, so like.
It's necessarily making them work together. It's just making sure people in the community who want to have a voice and a part of it do get an opportunity to. So we open up the advisory committees to everyone. They have a chance to apply. These groups right here, they have had a vested interest. They have been doing it, but there have been some calls for people that, well, can I be part of that? And right now, some of the groups are like, well, this is kind of our group. And that could be fine if that's how you report. Do we want to make space for other people to be part
So that's basically the town saying, okay, if you want to do this as a town event, we want you to work with this other group, and we're going to do that, but we're going to funnel that through an advisory committee, right? What's the difference from just saying, hey, listen, I want you to work with We Strive on the next Holy event, right? Because they are part of our community too, right? So
feel is open to that.
but it's still our event, right? So we get to have that say anyway. So this feels like we're inventing a bunch of procedure to basically make people from our community work together. But I feel it's already in our control to do that as it stands, right? If we say thumbs up, like, we're inviting We Strive to the conversation about Holy next year. aren't we there, right? Like what else are we trying to achieve?
We're basically giving her the authority to say, these are the amount of people on this group. These are the people that make the decisions. These are the people that gotta do them. That's giving her that authority to do that.
My point is, I think she already has that.
How much more time is it gonna take you to create all this process, actually?
I mean, this was just something that has come up, you know,
We've gotten conflicting feedback from the groups that we put down. So
some feel very strongly.
we'll go forward if I hear consensus with being as inclusive, but within limits, we can't have a 30-person committee. We've got to have decisions, but we will work our best to be inclusive of those that want to work on an event within the limits of getting an event done. You guys are good with that concept? You don't need to spend a whole lot of time.
Fine with that as long as it's.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, we've got to put a limit on the side, but I mean, I think there's some value to having, you know, there are a lot of these groups and a lot of these events that have had a continuity of action forward their very young lifespan. I think having that as a continuity source is really important, but yeah, I hear people who are like, hey, I didn't know we had Indigenous people. Can I join that committee? And I was like, what? I don't even know if there's a committee for that.
Well, I'll just say, I mean, you guys probably knew about the humps up thing. These holy fest, they actually on different days, and these holy is weekends or something, like it was a thing. And what I said is like, if you guys want to do this, like, you could, that's what we have, coming back to the community sponsor event, like, if you want total control and you want it to be your people doing this in your time, we can have 2 holy events. 2 community groups can do it, and we'll just provide a park and we'll do that stuff. So that there's always that option. I think it's a town run event, like, it should be, it needs to be open, like, you know, it's a town run event, right? It needs to be open to the entire community. Okay?
You mean in this way? These groups like this?
I don't know, all of them, yes, and I don't know if 6 is the right number, like 3, 6, like I'm not,
We can work through that.
yeah.
The concept though, of you would like them open, but also knowing that we've got to have limits. So you gotta lead, some of you are gonna be approached by, I wasn't allowed to be on this committee because we already had 10 people on it. It's gonna happen. People are gonna be winners and not winners in this, but
I'm sure over time, I mean, looking at each group, if you're trying to maintain a core group that have been able to do this, I mean, there will be a natural bit of attrition.
Yeah, and also for the sustainability of these committees for the long term, I think 10 years, 20 years out, like you need a cycle through new people who can pick up the mantle and the original people to move on with their lives and do other stuff and move away or go to college or whatever it may be.
And so how are we gonna manage this? Is this another committee that we're gonna run through, the clerk's office, or is this,
This is-
purely like an organization?
Basis, they meet once.
But then what's the 3-year term? Who's managing the 3-year term?
Yes, yes.
it can become real formalized real quick.
Yeah.
Or not.
I'd rather her just do it.
I would say not. If people really want to get involved, we should say we have an open
Right.
forum.
And
where
then,
people wanna run
and
this
I'm sorry,
program.
Hamza,
And not-
we
and
don't
not
have a
us.
monopoly on this.
Not us name them, right? Not the council naming like we do the, I agree with that. Yes, I agree. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so you guys are good.
Yeah.
But informal.
And there's potential that you'll be spoken to by people who did want to be on the event committees and the committee potentially couldn't be. Got our committee, and we don't want to add anybody. So be prepared if that happens.
For me, because they're cultural committees, I want to be involved in some way because I have a connection with people. So at the end of the day, it rests with me to some extent. So I want to be involved, whatever that process is.
Like serving on the committee? Or helping.
You're gonna be an organizer now.
No, no.
So, yeah, I think that's way too much weight for what we're trying to achieve. And I think that, we need to make it clear, as long as this is a town event, there's no exclusivity. This is not a Humps Up event or, whoever, right? It's like we get to pick and choose who we want to work with to get the event off the ground. And so this feels a little bit too much formality for me. Because like now we're getting into appointments and transitions and all that stuff. And,
I agree.
yeah, I don't think we need any of that. I think you already have the authority to choose your partners, right? So choose your partners. And if HomeSub doesn't like it, then I'm sorry, HomeSub. This is the way to go. You know, you can go community event that you can do it yourself, but this is the way we're gonna do it, as long as this is a town event.
But also effective communication, because I know some of those groups have put out, hey, we want you to be a part of what we're doing. We want you to be a part. I don't know how far that message has actually went out to the community. So I think working with communications team is going to be. Key.
And to be clear, I'm not picking on HomeSub, it's just an easy reference, right? So like, I'm not saying that they're bad actors or, yeah.
But they were willing to have an employees group.
Right, so like, again, like, if, no offense meant to HomeSub and the HomeSub community.
All right. This is sort of like additions, some things that we think might be helpful, because we sort of maybe are at a saturation point. Special events have been growing, 31 and 30% effectively with town and community events. I made a heat map for you to kind of look at different weekends. And there are a couple that kind of come into play, like, so April right here, all the way to May, that's 5 weekends in a row. There are actually 2 events on the 27th. So it's really hard to have, a work-life balance for some people. We do have a core group that we work with from Parks Ops, Parks and Recreation, Public Works. But if somebody's gone, it's sort of difficult for us to fill in. And so some things that we were thinking that might be kind of helpful with the number of events that we have. If you just come off our calendar event, we didn't have the paper in there. About that. Electric pedestals in the town hall parking lot. So there's been a call to have more events and town hall space, which is great. It's a great campus for that, but we also have programming at the senior center, the community center, and we have athletics. So if we have a lot of large events here, we don't have parking, we can shut them down. We can't have athletics, we can't have programming. One thing that I think would be really helpful is the town hall parking lot, or getting ready to go under construction, so it's a good time to do this, is putting electric pedestals in there, because then I can shut that parking lot off. That can be a solo event right there, and we can keep the rest of town campus open. So I think it'd be really helpful if we had electric pedestals over there. We could have food trucks, we could have a stage, they could have their vendors over there. That kind of keeps it contained. We also leave the rest of campus open with the senior center parking, just kind of going away with the Tunstall House and the ARC parking, because right now the pedestals are in the gazebo lot and the ARC lot. And so if we want to have events, we usually gear towards those areas. There is one power source behind the sign in the town hall parking lot, but I feel like if we had more pedestals, it might be easier for us to have more events on campus without disrupting the programming and athletics.
I know we'd already talked about this at some point. Oh, we'd already said yes to.
Oh, good, yay,
Yes.
okay, check.
A while ago.
Who heard that? Okay, I didn't hear that, that didn't trickle down to me.
here.
Yeah.
They're over here. We have them.
Can I ask
My assumption is that there was an assessment going on to figure out where to place these all around campus, so if we decided to shut down the entire campus to have events, these would be available regardless of where they're at. So that was where I was at in my understanding.
I thought our original conversation on with the ARC and the gazebo area. So that was the original conversation that I recall. But this would be an addition.
This would be
This
behind
area
the
was
town
not
hall
part of
lot.
that. When that was approved, it was, when that was approved, I think, I mean, in a year, I mean, in 2 years.
It was 2 to 3, yeah.
Yeah, so this side over here was not included in that.
So yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, are we also talking about the Saunders Street parking lot? And are we planning for these things there too?
Well, that's a different conversation. So,
Okay.
This is just for town hall, the town hall parking lot, which right here, we were talking about
Maybe
putting
more
9,
Big Fest
because
eventually.
then we could
Got a lot.
have 3, 3, and 3.
Does this be big?
But Saunders has them today. Like, I just don't want them to be removed as part of the.
Yeah, they have them today. I guess they can be moved to where we want them, because we're not gonna have.
No kidding.
But yeah, I think you're gonna be surprised by the people that are gonna want events back there, even more than maybe town hall in the future, because it'll be big enough, but also nearer to downtown. And accommodating that, I think will be important in the future, personally.
Oh, yes.
The next thing we were talking about, back to this heat map, we have so many days in a row, so many weekends, it's hard. One thing we did identify is having a parks operation crew, because they're almost at every event that would be there specifically for special events. When they were working special events, they would be at Pleasant Park. They've already been identified 3 of these 4 positions in the fiscal year 2026, 27 staffing plan. So there would be a special events park supervisor or parks operation team leader, and then 2 park operation workers. So they would supplement other staffing needs, but also they would work on events. So we don't have to worry about special event pay or overtime. This group for setup would be just for events.
What's the difference between a supervisor and a team lead? And
That's something I can answer.
So the supervisor position would be the supervisor over all of the crews at Pleasant Park. So this would be an additional crew at the Pleasant Park. So he would be over at least 2 different crews at Pleasant Park. And we have 1 primary crew that strictly works at Pleasant. This particular crew would actually be Pleasant, supplemental, and mainly special. Because we don't have special events every single day. So Pleasant Park is always as much as it's used. So this would supplement anything that we need out there at Pleasant Park.
And these were originally identified for the baseball came on line.
And that
and they
would
would
also
be-
help.
And so is this part of your next budget ask? So it's just, okay, so we're not asking for a budget variance right now. We're asking for consideration in next year's budget.
But this is different.
It's staffing plan 26, 27. But this would be, we would like to push it up because of the pressure that's on special events currently.
Understood. So you're basically putting it in the 25, 26 budget.
This is a preview related to.
Okay.
But I'm concerned about the heat map because this doesn't address that. Are you empowered for the non-date specific events to say, hey, we need to spread these out more? So it's not so clustered?
I don't really use the all that we have our event. So what I am sort of do is I'm like the liaison for staff, the event organizers, you guys, administration. So an event would come to me, whether it's a town event or a community event, I would sort of write it up and put it forward, and then people kind of say yes or no to it. I kind of give, I reach out to special events with the 6th committee, which I have, which is made up of different departments that we kind of strategize and work on the logistics of the event. And then we make recommendations, but then ultimately it's not my decision if we do or do not do an event, or if we do or not have a date. So I just put forward the recommendations, and then it's sort of decided at higher level.
Okay, but the town ones, there's some that can be flexible, I guess, right? That we do have a say on. Maybe.
Yes.
Right.
Most of them are pretty standard now.
Okay.
We added Foley, last year, and that's a new one, and whether or not we keep with the housing fair, things like that. But, think Apex, that's gonna happen at the same time, or Earth Fest is gonna happen at the same time, fireworks, old fashioned 4th of July, all those kinds of things are gonna sort of stay. We have flexibility with programming for like Black History Month and Women's History Month, and that I do have a lot of say in, because that's 100%. But as far as like the town events themselves, like, for example, I was approached by an Asian American Pacific Islanders group. How come we don't have a festival from them? That's going to be coming down the pike. We got approached by having an Eastern European festival. So that's going to be, people are talking about, like, if we have this, if we have that, it could be community, it could be town. That's not a decision that I make, because some people feel like cultural events should be town, something that they should be community. Basically speaking, I just process everything. I try to get everyone's opinions like I'm doing now, and then just present it for the higher up to decide how they would like to move.
Mr. Bosberg, I gotta do this just as a personnel committee chair, so I know this is out of way. As personnel, so to speak, are there any other concerns from the other departments that we need to go through personnel committee? Just,
You're talking specifically to the crew that was mentioned?
yes. I
All
mean,
that will come through our normal process, through the personnel committee, and we'll take it through the budget process. I think what Lisa was doing is just kind of giving a preview, saying that it was also mirrored in our staffing plan. It's out there as a way to address the increase. It'll still, to your point, go through that normal process, so you can see it in conjunction with all the other departments.
They would bump it up.
Yeah.
Talking about.
and yeah, I know you're fronting it for us, but I would ask you to consider whether or not the current model of how we're staffing these special events is operating under the assumption as if these things are not really happening. I mean, we're getting more, we get more. They're really big and popular events, and we seem to staff it like it's a part-time job. And I just want to know whether or not we need to really look at it and say, this is as big a part of operation, whether Craig is asking for enough bodies to be able to do this so that we're not overstressing staff and we're not putting in the money in overtime. So I don't know what the number is. I don't, but I would like to see a little bit more of a expansionist view so that we can make a real budget analysis as to what can we absorb, what we can't absorb, because it seems to me like we're still approaching this like it's a part-time job.
Do we go back to the calendar that you had there? So I think, or maybe the chart's better. The previous slide, just show the growth of the events. So I think what you're touching on, sort of the problem I'm seeing is like at a high level, like the demand for special events is growing, and two things are true at once. A, it can't grow forever because just practically speaking, we can't keep adding events because we don't have the staff, we're not adding staff fast enough, or staff's overloaded. At a certain point, all events begin to suffer. Like all of those 40 events get worse when we don't have the capacity to put the effort that we need to make them as successful as they could be. So that's the problem. But at the same time, that as we're growing indefinitely, right, as the demand for events is growing and growing, we're finding it really hard to say no, right? Like when like you just brought an example, not to, I don't want to pick on anyone or single out, but you said API, like that's a perfectly reasonable request. Well, there's probably another 20 other perfectly reasonable requests. What do you do? Like at a certain point, we can't have, we're out of days, we're out of people, we're out of resources.
So one thing we've talked about is having an algorithm. So if we do accept a new event, maybe an older event drops off, or at that time, we consider more resources and staffing at that point. Like barriers have to be replaced every 5 years. So if we're going to keep adding events, we know that every cycle we improve these events, that barriers will go with it, so that we're ahead of the game. We've talked about something like that.
Can I make a suggestion? And it may be tremendously unpopular, but I think what other towns do, I think the solution to this conundrum is that the town needs to treat our special events that we have as sort of like an incubator, where the intention is we run them for a couple of years and get the committee set up, get some maturity in operations there. And then the intention for every single one of them, except for a handful, I'll say that the town is, 4th of July. Like there's a couple that are purely less, but for every other single one, the intention should be to spin them off into a group and be a community event that we would then support over time as the rate. And that's where we could free up staff capacity for the next event. We incubate API or incubate Holy or incubate whatever, and then kind of as capacity available, then we take on more events. So
Let's see that, I think that is encapsulating part of the problem, which is even if we incubate an event and we pass off an event, we still have a substantial amount of staff, time, effort, money, resources. So that's why I feel like the larger picture is, do we have, I feel like we need to figure out what's our staffing. Yeah, what's our max staffing, and then work your problem backwards and say, hey, we're here with this, and the reason why we can't add on this or that is because we max. And, we're gonna hit a max of only 365 days in the year, 52 weeks and, weekends. We've got some variables that are static. We just can't mess with those.
The other thing that I'm concerned with is, so the space that we're taking, right? Because like a lot of these events take place in parks, like let's have regular programming from a Parks and Rec point of view, right? That we're now disrupting because of these events. And so, I think we need to kind of set an upper limit for our capacity, not just based on staff and dollars, but also how many days of the year can we commit, what sort of resources for these events, right? And so there's going to be an upper boundary there too. And then I'm not sure how to be selective, one cultural group over another, like that's a whole different problem.
that's the hard part. There's two parts. Well, this growing, you definitely can. It's hard to stop growing because the requests in isolation are each very reasonable. How do you say to the next one? Not gonna say it for this time, but the next one comes along and it's perfectly reasonable request. How do you say, well, you're the one that we're gonna say no to?
Yeah, we're not doing anything for the Dutch just yet, so that's my next request.
But with every one of these events, even if it's not, even if it's community or whether it's town, there's still a significant amount of resources. That's the part that I want to make sure.
There could be a scoring thing you could do where you talk about town versus community, you talk about the location, because certain ones are easier to do than others as far as the commitment. The time of year, I think, matters because we're pretty light in August because it's so hot, and we're very heavy in April because it's nice weather. And so like the ones if they want to go in April, that's going to be harder than the ones in August or January. So I'm in my head thinking about a table that kind of spits out a score that I'm not sure how it's used, but it's like the level of the level of effort required type of score and desirability for the town that we kind of help decide things.
But those desirability criteria, I think, are very tricky, right? Because you still need to set criteria that says like, like your group is more important than your group, right? Because of, whatever the criteria, right? And so how do you differentiate that?
I didn't have that in the table because I didn't want to try to delve into that, but
like if you say, okay, you want to be in April, that's great, but you got to meet what criteria exactly. It can't just be staff investment because, there's more to it than that.
staff, money, how much it disrupts the downtown or the parks or the facilities. It's just and how close they are together. I mean, I think that matters because some people probably have no free days in April, the whole time. That stinks.
So yeah, this was Holy, this is Pit Fest, this is Earth Fest, this is Think Apex Ada Housing Fair, that's Peak Fest.
Big Best move because to get out of the heat. That was part of that one.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's what, so a lot of these are large. And then you're going right back over here. So this is Memorial Day, but you're heading back over here. We've got Pride and Juneteenth. And then we've got a Parks and Rec month. We all got big food. But then we've got the two big ones with fireworks and Old Fashioned 4th of July. So those are two all big ones to plan for. But the thing to be thinking about, so you're working these events, or planning for all of these, but you have to be ready for the fall. So it's 6 months out that I start meeting with the committee or a group or an organizer to start getting that event ready. So I still need to be meeting with people for the fall at that time frame. So just letting people know, that's just sort of how it works. There are down times, but those times like we're still working on the fall, and like right now I'm working on programming for Women's History Month or Black History Month. Just to make sure we can, like, we're trying to lock in somebody right now, the Black History Month, like, ooh, they're still in February. I mean, I'm in September and I'm trying to get somebody for February. So if you want to get good people, you gotta lock them in early. I mean, we're fortunate, like now that I've done this a year. So with Earth Fest, a lot of people that we have, like, oh, I'd love to come back. So book, those are good, but some of the other ones are still.
So my question then would be, do we need to put a cap on the events? Do we need to put a cap on the amount per month that's handled? Do we need to go ahead and get more staff involved as you out here? Thoughts? Because this is an operations issue, right?
Right, so it's definitely tied to, and you gotta go through with Craig and see what our capacity is. And then it's kind of to the point of, do we want to retract any? Do we want to maintain what we've got? Do we want to not add any new? React to that. If we decide that we're holding the line of what we've got now, then I think we can have some recommendations on some resources we need to plug in to make that whole. Because I would say we're not whole right now. We're looking at the hotspots. So we can definitely answer that. And if you say, well, we want to add 5 more events, we can tell you the staff of that, or if we have the ability to do that. I would say that we're at capacity on events. I mean, right now maybe you're in a little bit of a lull, but as Lisa just said, she's constantly working on those next things. So not that you asked my opinion on this, but
I do.
I mean, I think that there needs to be an analysis of what we view as core events to the town. And then we have community assisted events, right? And what that means, we can talk through the parameters, and it doesn't mean we're saying, hey, take this community, because as several of you have pointed out, we still assist to a great degree on community events. I think we're inconsistent on our level of support for those, and that's something that we need to work on. But I think we should have this core identified, and whether we do it through our budget, we say, okay, council adopted, here are our 10 core events, 12 core events, whatever that number is for the upcoming year, and it's tied to our staffing levels, and I can tell you, yep, those are your 12 events, you've got staff to cover those 12 events. Then here's your list of community assisted. It's gonna take some pre-planning potentially on that. Like, people are gonna have to say, okay, we want to host this event this year. We bring you a list of, here are the 25 requested community assisted events. How many do you want to do? This is what staffing level we're gonna have to give, depending on the number that you choose. So I think it is a healthy discussion to have relative to budget.
So what's the difference between, in terms of like effort or money, whatever it is, for community versus town, and also an event on the town campus versus an event in downtown? Is it widely different, those different categories?
Yes. So, take the first point, it depends on the numbers. So trash is a big deal. Something like Peak Fest, Italian Festival, anyway, has a lot of food, has a lot of trash. That's both Parks Ops and Public Works, like Christmas parade. Pig Fest is a really big one. It gets a lot of trash, a lot of cleanup with that one. Versus, downtown, it's so much easier to close off campus. And Conley just left, but he could speak to that. It's a lot easier on police to close down campus than to close down roads.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on the event, what they're asking for, and what we need to provide them. I mean, some groups don't necessarily have the capacity, even if they're a community event, to do their own trash. So they are. That's going to be our staff that handles that. So the bigger the event, the more the food, the more the resources for us.
I mean, like, we could potentially be hiring outside companies to do the work on.
They don't, from what they've heard is that they have to clean up after.
There's a quality that comes from our side. And so we'll always have staff.
So, but
The first thing we get hammered on about trash for us is oversight. In downtown, we'll let you know if that does not happen. And so for us, that's a key thing. And we'll still have volunteers assist with trash a lot for us. But we will have that oversight of the staff.
But you can oversee a third party, right? That you can have performance criteria in a third party contract that says, like, this is the before picture and you shall return it to this state, basically. Right. And then so, I think there's mitigation options there.
So we tried it, yeah.
We have not, but one thing I will say is the Parks Ops staff, Public Works, they actually help me on numerous levels too. So Public Works brings out the trucks for the barrier, the Parks Ops staff right now helps set things up. Like if we have the tents, for the shade tents or anything along those lines, they bring out the party trailers, so tables and chairs, all of that stuff. So,
But so hearing what you're saying, because it's kind of a double-edged sword for us as staff. Like, right, we want to control it to make it quality, but at the same time, we've got staff exhaustion, so we've got to go through. So I think kind of hearing where you are, it's something we need to examine as we approach budgets, look at potentially some contract out options. Maybe we try it, see how it goes. And
I mean, here's another thought, right? If we're worried about the quality of the event or the quality of service at the events, can we backfill normal operations to free up our town staff to work the events? Right, so instead of contracting the events, contract, normal or routine stuff. I don't know if that's gonna work on a Saturday or Sunday, right? But
I think
out there.
I'll just say again, what I said earlier, there's a fundamental scaling issue there. Part of solving that scaling issue has to be like, A, getting outside help, B, these events being self-sufficient to a certain degree. We're also get us talking, and the fact that people love these events, like they love they mean a lot to, first and foremost, the group of people who are bringing them on, but also the people who are attending them. And there are other communities in town that want to have events, and that's presents a scaling issue. That's what we have to solve. You can't just have 60 events next year and 80 events the year after. But
good conversation. I think we got, what, one more slide left, right?
Yeah, it was just about a special event. And that was just, the parks, the NC State Parks and Rec tourism program. Having an intern come in throughout the spring and summer so they can start helping plan some of the things while we're doing logistics or these ones that we're starting to
All right.
plan. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, okay. So did we land on this? Where did we land on this one?
We landed, that's gonna go through a bunch of.
That's cause we don't know what that's.
Okay, it can
No,
be up to this one.
I think it's a complex problem. Part of the scaling is gonna be staffing up, but it's also
Okay.
the other end, see how we can.
Okay, so intern, yes, pedestals, yes, this one, the other one is to be TBD.
That's right.
Okay. All right, do you have any
Any
questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Appreciate it.
For all that you do.
With that, we're gonna take a.
10 minutes.
Okay. Are we doing both these
I'm
things?
curious how late we're staying.
What?
How late are we staying?
We skip the facade? Had to happen right now?
Can't hear you.
Can we skip
She
the
waited this long.
facade grant one and just do the zoning one?
So I think this one had been waiting a month, so I was actually thinking the opposite.
Who's next?
Oh, okay.
Facade is time.
The other one, it doesn't have a timeline to it.
Let's go with
For prioritizing, can you do this?
facade. with the-
Okay, I was trying to, maybe,
The other one we can do another time. I was just asking, I can be here till whenever, but I'm sure y'all don't want me here till whenever.
make a quick note. Just for information, see our voting condition recommendations for areas, that item is of the 9/24 meeting and we'll move to the work session.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so we're gonna do it at the regular meeting.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. So we turn over now to Ms. Kent. Ready for you.
All right, I'm gonna. Too far, sorry. This is faster than the computer. Here we go. All right. Thank you. So this item was on the August 13th agenda, but we didn't have a chance to go through it. So we are asking for directions from you all on potential changes to the facade grant program. The decision points include the facade grant boundaries, the program funding limits, the individual project funding cap, and eligible improvements. The current facade grant program is coterminous with the Downtown Festival District. It's described in the UDO and shown on an associated map that I'll show you in a moment. So it's right here. As you may recall, last year we expanded it. It goes from the town properties to the north, so town campus, Hunter Street Park, all the way down the Salem Street corridor to include the churches along that corridor. And it's extended past West William Street down to Justice Heights Street and Tingen Road. And this was an easily identifiable boundary. That's why we used it. The prior facade grant boundary was the Central Business District, which was much smaller. And the Downtown Festival District is tied to UDO provisions. So if there's a desire to do a larger facade grant program area, we'd like to have it be a separate means and bounds description just for the facade grant. And so the questions are whether to change the boundary to that separate facade grant program area or to change the program townwide, which is another option. I'll just keep going because you don't have to answer yet. So the current facade grant program is staff approval. It's first come, first serve. There's a $20,000 total budget. We do not spend the full budget each year. We do have a few applications this year, and they're typically for things like paint and awnings. That's the most asked for improvements. We have had folks replace windows and doors on historic structures, but typically it's paint and awnings.
Can you give real quick, maybe I missed the last meeting. The purpose of this grant, has it been around for a long time? And was it kind of intended for those kind of things you just mentioned, really? Or is it broader and gotten narrower or vice versa?
So originally, when I first got here in 1999, it was already a grant program. It already existed. Our downtown at the time, half of it was boarded up, and there were a lot of improvements that needed to be made. It did allow a wide range of improvements: windows, doors, awnings, removing metal. They had some metal canopies that were like 70s style that you could get a grant to remove those. Over time, as development, businesses moved in and folks improved the facades. Mostly what it turned into is just awnings and paint. So when a new business comes in, a lot of times they want to rebrand, they want to have a new awning, they want to paint. That's been more typical of the last
Visual stuff.
Visual, absolutely.
Okay.
But we have done ADA accessible entrances. We've had a couple of those done in the past.
With the idea of that one, they wouldn't do it otherwise. Aren't they required to do that?
Well, yes, yeah. It depends if there's a change of use. If you've been there, you may, fall under a situation where you don't have to update it unless there's a change of use.
Okay.
And so the potential changes would be, should the approval be by a different group, a planning board or town council? Would you want the approval process to continue to be first come, first served? And would you want to authorize a higher total program budget? So right now, the individual project funding cap, there's a formula we've got, the grant provides up to 50% of the cost of the exterior rehabilitation based on 2 tiers. The first tier is $2,000 per facade for paint and awnings, or 50% of the cost, whichever is less. Most of the time, the cost is around $3,500, $3,600. So it's not, they don't quite get the full 2,000 because it's not been that expensive. Tier 2 is a maximum of 5,000 per facade for structural improvements. And these are the things like brick repair and replacement, door replacement, window replacement, ADA accessible entrance, similar structural repairs. And it's up to 5,000 or 50% of the cost. Those actually tend to be more expensive. So they usually get the full $5,000 when they want to do one of those items. The applicants can submit for a tier 1 grant and a tier 2 grant within the same fiscal year, but no property at this point can receive more than 7,000 in 1 year, which is the highest amount for tier 1 and tier 2. And then no more than 10,000 can be issued to one property within a 36-month period. We don't often get requests, year after year. Typically, if they're doing work, they want it all done in one fiscal year. And then, of course, the grants can't exceed the total amount budgeted. But again, I cannot remember. There may have been a time way back in the day when I think the total amount was like $8,000 a year that we gave it all away. But since we've moved it to 20,000, we have not given away the full amount. So the question is whether to change the formula to be percentage based on the investment, have a higher overall cap per project. And should the investment considered in the cap represent just the exterior improvements or the total cost invested in the business? And so the eligible improvements currently are facade related: removal of false fronts, such as aluminum panels, repair, replacement of windows, doors, and cornices, replacement of facade materials, repair, replacement of character defining architectural features, repair, replacement, or new ADA accessible entrance, awnings, decorative exterior lighting, exterior painting, and then design and construction costs. So the potential changes would be to allow additional improvements in the public space on private property. So creation of patios or other outdoor service areas, outdoor furniture, such as tables, chairs, and benches, planters. We'd recommend not including the vegetation as it's not permanent, but the actual planters themselves. Streetscape elements such as pavers, bricks, or bus stop areas on private property, and then other downtown plan elements like twinkle lights, murals on the ground, etc. Now I know Lori and I had talked, and she may have some things to relay to you. I think you had asked her to do a little bit of research into facade easements.
Yeah. So basically, for my part of it, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the different options or mechanisms that the council would have to help facilitate this program and potentially expand it if that was the council's desire. And so a couple of the different things that we had considered was either as a downtown revitalization project or projects, urban area revitalization projects, facade easements, and then of course there's always the option of a loan, and there are various mechanisms which you can do a loan to facilitate these. So essentially, the downtown revitalization project, when I looked at the enabling legislation for that, it talks mostly about construction improvements that are public infrastructure, or construction of public building. But it does add providing additional city services or functions to a greater extent than those provided or maintained for the entire city. So essentially what you would do is create a municipal service district that would equate to the downtown development district that you wanted to apply that services to, if you wanted to do something different than typically the Salem Street block or two.
But that's like usually a tax thing too, right? Because they tax extra themselves to get the more services.
They could, but not necessarily. So,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, but it not.
I've heard of it more in that respect in North Carolina, at least, in my experience.
Like a tax overlay district.
Yeah, yeah. Is that different than what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but at any rate, most of that is talking about, for the downtown revitalization, really kind of focuses more on public infrastructure, streetscape, extending water and sewer services, extending roads, converting roads from, private to public, those sorts of things. The urban revitalization, urban area revitalization doesn't really fit in this area because you have to be adjacent to major transportation corridors and no residential within 150 feet. And so with the amount of residential that we have in these areas that were considered in that proximity, I think it would be too soon to consider a urban area defined there. And then the other thing that we talked about were facade easements. I was able to find an example of a facade easement, not in North Carolina, but in another state. An easement could be, again, just limited in scope, so it would be for the facade, which in this particular easement, they defined it as the first 12 inches of depth of front of a building. The easement can be of a limited duration, so 2, 4, 6 years, depending on the amount of contribution that the town might be providing. It can be limited in scope. And then would include a right of access for the town. It would include requirements that the construction be completed and in a workmanlike manner and lien-free and subject to the approval of the town. So it would give the town some control over, what sort of improvements were going to be made, but how they were made also. So if you were going to say it would allow for awnings on the building, the town might be able to dictate the color of the awnings. If you wanted to make sure that your downtown were developed in, a certain way, to look a certain way. And then also the easements would make sure that the property owner would indemnify the town, because we don't want to take responsibility for any of the liability that may occur as a result of the building or the facade improvements. And yeah, give the town authority to inspect the easement areas. So the facade easement gives some flexibility. Of course, the town would, pay for it, the easement. It gives the town some amount of control. I did hear concerns from staff that a lot of these smaller projects would probably not be interested in going through a easement process to receive a facade grant. So that would be a little bit of a trade-off. Somebody who was interested in making or receiving a higher amount of a grant may be willing to go through an easement kind of process, but those who are looking for a little bit of help for paint or awnings would likely not be interested in.
Could we do some easement as well as kind of current policy? I mean, if we have someone who wants to have a larger project and we like to have it over regarding how it looks, it would essentially kind of offset the percentage aspect.
Mm-hmm.
How much is this facade worth to us? We can pay that.
So what I'm hearing is there would be 2 separate programs. One for our more traditional facade grants that would be made for paint awnings, and the second one that would be a higher level of contribution for an easement.
Because the idea of it, like the smaller business for being asked to use. I'm going to provide an easement. I add.
Or maybe a tiered program.
Yeah, kind of a tiered program might be the one.
Yeah.
Tier 1, tier 2, kind of stay the same.
Right.
Tier 3, that would give us a little.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think, the council would just need to determine what sort of control or improvements they would want to see based on that third tier.
So the legal standing of the facade grant easement thing, you think is better than our current, what we're currently doing?
So we're talking about expanding the program. Do we know why we're not spending the $20,000? So there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of uptake as it stands right now. So do we have any feedback from business owners or property owners as to why they're not taking us up on the existing grant program?
We just talk with the people who come and are interested in the grant, or we have folks that submit a small town character application, which is required, and we say, hey, have you heard about our facade grant program? Because you would qualify. And then most of the time, once they hear about it, they want to take advantage of it. But it's typically a new business owner, and a lot of times it's the tenant, not the building owner, that is applying for the grants that we offer currently. So I think that the building owners would be way more interested in the facade easement with a higher dollar amount. So I think it might actually target a different group.
I think that was kind of my thinking. That's if you've got a tenant who's like, I really want this, but but I don't have the real ability to ask for it, whereas the building owner could actually say, all right, well, this actually makes it a little bit more consistent, and we get a chance to maintain that control, consistency, things of that nature. And we can also put it, I'm assuming that because it would be an easement, we would be essentially negotiating some of the finer aspects of the facade. I mean, within limits of our current UDO, but how it would look, how much it would be. I think it gives us a lot more flexibility with regard to not only management, but being able to figure out how much the cost of that easement would be. I feel like that gives us a lot of flexibility. I like the idea of a third tier. And I think that'll open up things to a number of businesses that quite frankly could use that additional assistance so that we can maintain some kind of consistency with downtown. Because I do think that there's a real, it is important to understand that when it comes to these sort of programs, that we're trying to do what we can to encourage as much of our downtown area. And in order to do that, we need to go outside of the tenant and more or less provide the opportunities for the building. I think we'll get good design results.
How would be sized, right? So is there any compares other municipalities, like you said you found an example, right? Because at the end of the day, in my mind, this is an investment, right? Like it's an investment in maintaining the downtown character, making our downtown appealing, getting a business owner, improving the property, which yields on the back end, property taxes. The more people come visit downtown because it's an attractive area, the more money they spend, the more we collect sales taxes, right? So at some points, the public dollars that we spend need to come back to us in some way, right? And so how do we kind of scope this, right? If somebody comes to us and got $100,000 project, like how do we say, yeah, that's a good investment for us versus no, that's too much, right? Or or $200,000 or $50,000, how do we kind of draw the boundary? Is it an arbitrary number? Is there something rooted in the tax code or legal statutes that gives us a clue here? Because we can just start throwing numbers out that we feel comfortable with. But it's like,
So my suggestion is this is just as complicated as a lease. Because each person that comes with a plan, what they want to do is going to be very different requests and very different requirements. How they want to do their facade, different, what changes they want to do. And I think this is something that's going to have to be very interesting. I mean, we can always put a cap on it. You can't ask for whatever it is. But I do think this is something that I would like to do, council, at least these third tier things, for us to decide to group. Probably not. Explore. But individually. Yeah. Because I still don't see a run on this. I see this as an occasional.
I'm just thinking about the legal standing, and if we do it the way kind of maybe that first option, the third one you just talked about, it seems to me like going up higher with the amount of dollars is less risky and maybe a good idea versus if we're kind of shaky right now. I'm not excited about much about the expansion of the program, but I'm spending a lot more. But if it's the easement thing or that downtown thing you said, it seems like that's the way we could change it in a way that's better for everybody.
And with or without a downtown revitalization district, you all have the authority to make a lot of the infrastructure improvements regardless. So you could have, you could expand the downtown plan streetscape to extend all the way between Hunter and Williams, for example, instead of, just wherever it is now. And I'm sorry, I don't know the limits off the top of my head. But so those kinds of things are already within your control. If we're talking about an easement, I think while there's going to be some individualization based on different project, I think there needs to be some defined terms as to what the town is willing to participate in and what the town is not willing to participate in. So, and we can also talk about, is it parking improvements with a parking lease? Where there's some shared parking with the town. Is there, again, we want to make sure that our downtown continues to thrive and to expand. So you want to make sure that the facade materials are the same throughout, or similar or colors or schemes like that. So I think with a higher dollar amount, I think also needs to become a longer easement and where you get more of that public benefit, whether it's in the dollars per se returning to the town, or whether there's at least an aesthetic benefit, a safety benefit, additional lighting, things about safety kind of things, additional parking, all of these kind of things that can play into. So I agree with what Councilmember Killingsworth said about they'll be individual, but I think we still need to have some criteria as to what that will look like and a cap on what your dollar amount is going to be. And then there's going to be the administration of it. So,
And so what happens to an easement? Let's say we do a 5-year easement. What happens after 5 years? Do we simply abandon that easement or do we get some?
it would terminate by its terms.
You mentioned earlier you found an example outside of North Carolina. Makes me a little nervous. Are you certain we have the authority inside of North Carolina to require such an easement?
I think there are various avenues that we can take to acquire such an easement in North Carolina.
Second question, when we go to acquire such an easement, would there have to be an appraisal? And would our contribution then need to be proportional to the appraised value?
I think an appraisal is going to be, you can certainly request an appraisal of the value of property in its current condition. And then limit your dollar figure to, something that's appropriate based on the current value of the property for those improvements. But I think it would be difficult to get an appraised value of a facade easement. And they're just not happening. It's going to be difficult to find an appraiser who's going to be able to give a dollar figure for the appraisal for the easement.
But on the upside, that would give us a lot of negotiating power. So we think that this is something that, in terms of, we could negotiate how much we feel is the appropriate amount for that particular easement. And I like that flexibility.
Also keeping in mind though, that we want to have something that is fair across the board. So regardless of the project that comes in, if it's somebody in downtown who would like to do a facade easement that's It's like for like, we're not giving 10,000 over here for a 10-year easement that we only have control over the paint colors. We're giving $100,000 over here for, you know, a 2-year easement, and we don't have control over nearly as much. That makes sense.
That makes perfect sense.
This easement would be voluntary. They would enter into the agreement. It's not like we're forcing an easement on somebody.
Right.
That's what, yeah. That's why they join us for the money. And an easement could be roughly the value of the project or some kind of fraction of the project, right? It doesn't even have to be necessarily.
You still want some skin in the game. $50,000 project.
Yeah.
We're giving you the full amount that's easement for the full project. We have an interest on it.
So easement, I think everybody said they agree on that, or at least for the next.
Could the easement also do those other things on the bottom there? Or are those separate?
Oh, which ones?
Because I really like the
Patios
the-
and
the people space thing, creating things.
yeah, anything on the outside.
And again, like, I mean, how do you enumerate the public benefit of that? Like they have a patio, does that mean that patio is accessible, not open, that they can sit down, relax, that sort of implies we have an easement to it?
I think it just
I
means
think
they have to keep it up to
Mhm.
certain standards. So, you know, sometimes people's patios start looking a little bit.
Like, what's the, like, they don't.
You go in and fix it for it.
Like, what's the.
Or write some letters.
Well, then it's hard, we're gonna go sleep.
I like the idea of still having first come, first served.
Yeah, I was gonna go back and see.
Working by council, having a associated with that.
Council just for tier 3 though.
I
I don't think you guys want to deal with them.
Yeah.
Do we send it to the planning board first? Or does it come straight?
Public hearing. Or public plan, and whether it's appropriate for us to public money and.
Benefits, consent. Just make it easy.
Consent.
Yeah, make it easy.
A public hearing would not be required, but it would be great to have a public hearing.
I just think, the staff is the one that's going to determine if this project's kind of meets the letter of the spirit.
I think the whole point is, I think to come from Phil's point, is that these easements might be bespoke in the sense of what the easement's gonna be based on the project, based on public benefit. We have to weigh whether it's worth the money. Like sometimes we may get parking spaces, valuable those. Other times we may get, just the awning that deals, but.
Can we treat it as new business, for now? But that do probably.
That's what I would
use
recommend.
it for Conversation.
That's fine.
I
Yeah.
like that.
And then if are we gonna cap this at an amount, we're gonna take it individually, so say, because a lot of the other is what, 20,000?
20,000.
And tier 1 is 2,000, tier 2 is 5,000.
Well, can we come back up about the tiers? Are we changing the whole program to the easement thing? Or, okay, I'm confused. No.
Everything else stays the same.
Oh, and tier 3 is the bigger ones that would have the easement. Okay. 'Cause we don't want to do an easement for a small one, even though if we can make tiers an easy thing to do, right?
We don't, I'm just gonna tell you, I talked with Liz, who administers the program, and she literally handholds, has them come in and sits down with them to help them fill out the application. These folks are not able to deal with an easement. They would have to hire an attorney. They would get less money back, is my guess.
Okay, so easements are not, can never be easy to do. By
No,
moving
but it
things.
might be worth it for a large tier 3 project.
Okay,
And
Facilitate a larger conversation.
right.
If you get to, we can always explore options where, just like there are other improvements that the town will partner with the developer for extension of a water line or extension of a sewer line. There's opportunity as well in a downtown area to partner with the business that's renovating. Pay them to do some streetscape improvements while they're doing the rest of their improvements. pay them to do, you know, some of these public projects while they're there, which may, be a benefit to both them and the town.
So total budget for this, if we end up saying, say 50% of costs or something like that.
While you're thinking of that too, I think there are two questions within that. It's budget, you don't have a budget for it now, so I think the council wanted to start that program versus next year's budget, which if it's next year's budget, we have a little bit of time to think about it. If it's something council wants to start now, then.
It sounds like there's a lot of stuff that needs to be worked out.
Yeah, we need some time.
I don't know now,
Easy.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, he said.
This one here now.
I'm good.
I would expect as a part of next year's budget process to consider whatever we decide.
Yeah, let's see if we can get some compares, right? Because we can all start throwing out numbers, 50%, $50,000, whatever, right? That's like, let's see if there's any benchmark or anything that we can kind of get our hands on, just to say what's reasonable.
Can I just add one thing? And I do agree on this time, but are there opportunities to bring it back? I mean, would that be pressing too much? Like, and put it in this year's budget, would that be an issue?
I mean, we have to figure that out. I need to talk to staff on what it's gonna take to develop. I think fiscal year, we're not too far into the fiscal year. So even if I came back in 4 months and said that, then something is doable, come back in 4 months. So we've got to find money somewhere, right, Sean?
Just a conversation. I certainly wouldn't be opposed to an amendment on this if you guys come up with the numbers on the numbers.
That direction helps. If you're open to something this fiscal year, we can see where our plan is, find some money and come back to you.
Oh, it's hilarious. The look on his face was like, excellent.
So what's the proposed,
It's not me.
can we summarize what we're citing here for my end, like
I heard Sean is gonna find us a ton of money.
An easement.
an easement for the tier threes? Okay.
This, grant program.
Okay, so, okay,
It's coming to us to decide whether or not to approve whatever it is. First come, first one basis.
Yeah.
We haven't decided on the amount yet.
Uh-huh.
So, and we're adding.
And the
those
boundaries.
additional things that you talked about.
yeah, I love those bottom things. So, but that would go into that list. It wouldn't be necessarily a certain tier, depending on I guess, how much it's gonna be, because doing planters is not gonna be a ton of money, right?
Yeah.
So I do have a bit of an issue with planters, like, what kind of planters are we talking about? Like, because that to me is like, I can pick up a planter and move it, right? It might be a heavy planter, but unless it's something that's fixed in place, right? It needs to be something that.
The streetscape type planters are considered street furniture
Yeah.
and they're heavy,
Yeah.
like the benches and the garbage cans we have out. It's that type of planter. And we would not include we wouldn't include the vegetation. It's the physical
Yeah.
container. And it would not be from Lowe's. You order these things from their streetscape companies that supply.
That's your intention, and that's, I think we're.
Yeah, so like, I want it to be bolted to the ground and then they move.
So heavy it's not.
Yeah, and I agree that I think, temporary fixtures like outdoor furniture, again, unless it's solid, bolted to the ground, permanent, we wouldn't want to include those in an easement program. But a heavy, streetscape type of planter, also thinking about some of the things that are in the downtown plan on Commerce and on, Seaward Street, extending those up. So whether it's the brick pavers, I won't say it right, catenary lights. Did I say it right finally? Third time? Close. Yeah. you know, those kinds of things that we're already trying to incorporate down in the downtown plan, extending those further towards, the rest of the district.
Yeah, I just don't want to have people to buy a cute little, bistro set, right? And as soon as the business moves, the bistro set, right? That's not the intent here.
As far as total budget, for this, obviously we have to go higher than 20,000 already there.
Yeah, I think that's the number that you guys are trying to come up with.
Well, are we keeping tier 1 and tier 2 at 20,000 and then the extra will be associated with that tier 3?
And the question, total budget versus,
Yeah, so I mean, we're using 50% in tier 1, tier 2, like maybe that's, just for sake of consistency, you want to use, the same 50%, but then, what's the cap that we said is 25K, 50, 100, how big do we want to make this? Kind of depends on how much money Sean is going to find for us.
I think it also depends on what types of projects we're thinking might fall into this. So if we're thinking, that if, the improvement of the streetscape behind some of these buildings as part of a public-private kind of enterprise, there's going to be higher costs. Right. So that we may need to consider a much higher level of budget to facilitate that.
Yeah, but those things are almost like doing the downtown streetscaping for us, right? And so I think that becomes more of a true one-off that, okay, do we want to make a budget amendment for this because it's avoids, certain costs that we are anticipating down the road, So that may not fit in.
We want a number associated with it. Is it something that is kind of negotiable thing on the project?
I think we need to protect ourselves a little bit.
Recommend that we have some parameters for this and some standards so that it's not, like I said, the situation where you've got one that just happens to ask for 10,000 and then the next one asks for, 100,000, but it's essentially the same easement. So we want to make sure that we have some consistency and fairness across that.
Well, his point about the, I'm assuming with the streetscapes, someone may not want to be a part of this and we'd have to kind of force the issue and that would cost a lot versus if it's temporary and it's less money from them, that they may want that because they may say, oh, in 10 years, I'm not sure what I want to do. And it would revert back to, and that could be bad, I guess, for the town to revert back to something that was formerly public-esque, but it may be a way we can get the things we want faster and cheaper than it would have been doing the way I think we're headed to some of the stuff we're doing downtown right now.
And I think there would be a way to distinguish like permanent improvements that the town wants to maintain ownership with over time versus those that we would be agreeable to a temporary easement. Because that's what we're talking about with facades is a temporary easement. So it's not in perpetuity. Control that aspect of the property.
Okay, I'm just thinking about the part behind Seaboard.
Yep.
Would that could fall into this category too, right? 'Cause we're not necessarily gonna do the lights, or are we? What's the plan? I don't even know what the plan is for that area back there.
I don't know either.
We have cute little maps that we have at these units.
Yeah, I knew the maps look great, but I'm like, how's it gonna happen?
Renderings.
Yeah.
Anywho. I think we have some pictures. Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
So what is the unique?
I mean, and we can pivot on a couple of pieces. I think we've got direction to go develop a program. We can kind of marinate on how much you want to budget and what that cap is. You can come back on that. We have enough general direction. That we good? Or you good for now?
Yeah.
But you shook your head
Not
for other things
propose
that we haven't, right?
We haven't set the budget and we haven't set a cap. So those are two decision points that we're going to have to come back to, but we can punt on that.
Well, we can know the cap in theory, get to the cap by things that they have brought to you guys possibly, and you guys said, no, that's too much, and that's a bad thing to use the program, right? Or has that happened?
I don't think we've had people that have talked, and we could even talk to economic development to see if they've heard from any businesses or projects. We've heard a couple of things. You can kind of vet that a little bit and come back and say, this is what we heard. This is an example of a project.
So I'll just say, on historic buildings, typically it's $1 million that they're investing in those buildings, and that's on the low end. That's like minimum. So just, I mean, it's a big amount of money. If it's a historic building. If it's not a historic building, then they don't have as many rules that they gotta follow. It might be less, but I'm sure that when Tap Station came in, they would have loved to have been in the district and been able to ask for funds to do, you know, things out there. There's others like that potentially would come in, but the historic structures are very expensive to renovate.
Yeah, and then you also have the protection of the sidewalk that has to be installed and the cost of all that comes into play. So, you know, getting the right materials, because especially if it's a contributing structure, so there's a lot that goes into improving and restoring historic buildings.
And that is the area where you see more of these facade grants are in the preservation of historic structure.
So in that concept, you're talking about 50%, example, $1 million, 50%, talking 500,000. So, I mean, I think for this program to be substantial impact, we need to be in the mindset of a couple $100,000.
Per project.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if that doesn't scare you, head in that direction.
But how many of those projects do we truly have, right? Because a lot of our downtown is already renovated. I can think of a couple of buildings where I would like to break the black tile. But you know, like in my mind, like I'm really trying to expand the downtown area, like especially that section, you know, leading up to William Street, right? And make it more for, you know, the expanding on the corridor, right? Where that investment has not yet been made. There's really no tall structures in there. So I hear what you're saying, right? But I think that, you know, even if you don't pop up at $500,000, there's still significant work we can do with, you know, $100,000, $200,000 investment.
I was suggesting on the high end, right? Pretty south of that. So we're between 20 and 500,000. We'll work with that.
Sounds good. Good return on investment. All right, any other? Good. All right.
So are you all good with the current boundary for this expansion? Yeah,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work on it.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Good job.
Thank you for staying late.
Thank you for carrying.